history major, you might have read the email, he's doing an independent study on something that drives him crazy, which is historical movies that are not correct historically. So he's chosen several movies this semester to focus on. One is the movie 300. Has anyone seen it?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Yeah. And then what else are you going to do later? Not today, but...
Two more. I think the next one will be Troy.
Troy. And he hasn't decided. So he's focusing on three movies this semester to see what if it's true and what if it's not true. And so I asked him to come here. Of all the courses I teach, I asked him to present this to you. Now, I'd like you to plug in your greater mind, right? Your Homo sapien mind, your critical mind. What's critical thinking?
Asking why.
Right. Now, he'll be teaching you something about the movie 300, which is interesting, right? And you'll be thinking about it. But your critical mind, I want to also at the same time ask this question. Why or how does this have anything to do or connect with how we are learning Ugandan history? Nothing in this movie is about Uganda, right? So it's not that simple squirrel connection. There's some sort of idea connection I want to see if you can make between what he's doing and how he's doing it and what we're doing and how we're doing it for our course. So I'd like if you're thinking about two things at once, one of which is this movie and the presentation that Mr. Gonzalez is making, but also asking, what's this got to do with what we're doing? How can I relate this to what we're doing? So, put your critical mind to work. How's that sound? All right, I'm going to leave it to Mr. Gonzalez now.
Thank you. Well, welcome everybody. Thanks for coming. And she said, my name is Frank Gonzalez, history major here, and I'll be making this with three presentations. The first one of them all on historical movies, and basically what I'm trying to do is, like Dr. Barry King said, is to tell lies from truth from lie. And because these movies, something that we have to understand is that that's what they are, movies for entertainment purposes. They're not historical documentaries that we should expect accuracy and to be completely correct. So, of course, directors of these movies change things a little bit, add some stuff, take out some other stuff. And, movies are great. I think this movie, everybody saw it. It's a great movie. It's very graphic. It's a great movie, but the problem is that, according to communication experts, the movies are the most powerful means of communication, more than TV, more than radio, more than newspapers. All the communication media there is, movies are the most influential ones. So, as that is a good thing, it's also a risky thing, because if you alter history in those movies, then the people are going to be very influenced by it, and they'll be influenced with the wrong information. So that is why. And as she mentioned, this is one of my passions and also one of my pet peeves, that people go to the movies and they come out thinking they just had a history lesson and they go about preaching the wrong stuff. So that's something that I'm trying to fix with this presentation. So the first one, as you can see, is obviously 300. I try to pick movies the big blockbuster movies, so everybody has seen them already, and if you haven't, then it's pretty easy to get access to them. So let's get started. First slide is, as you see, maybe a lot of you don't know this, but this movie is actually based on a comic made by Frank Miller. And I want to ask you, if those of you who saw this movie, who thought it was real?
You mean it was based on reality?
Yeah, who thought it was like made up, or who thought it was real?
Kind of was real.
I thought it was probably based on a true event, but...
Yeah, I did.
Well, it is. That's the first thing you have to know. It is based on a true event. It's a true battle. We'll get to the battle later. But what I want to say here first is that the movie is based on this comic. This comic came out probably about 10 years ago, and they just decided to make a movie about it. So these are all images taken from the comic itself, and it does tell the real story somehow. So getting into the story itself, before the whole movie, as if you remember, is based on one battle, a single battle. And I mean, I want to give you some very brief background on how is it that they get to the battle. You know, it's not just a random battle in the middle of nowhere. There is something behind it. So I will just briefly take you there. So the battle that you see in the movie belongs to the Greek and Persian Wars, which took place at the beginning of the 5th century BC. And what you have here is a map. It's a map of it's the southeastern part of Europe and the whole Middle East, all the way to Western India. And this, what you see here colored, is supposed to be blue. This, what you see here, is the Persian Empire back those days. And as you can see, it's huge. It's really, really huge. It's one of the biggest empires of antiquity. And what you see here, this tiny thing with a circle right here, that is Greece. Now, something that is important to know about this time, and it's something that it's one of the errors in the movie, is that they refer to Greece as a country. And Greece was not a country at this time. And Greece was a collection of city-states that were independent from each other, but who shared so much in common that they were regarded as a single country. Marv is not a country, it's a region of 3 different states that share a lot in common, so for practical reasons, we just put them together under a single name. So that's pretty much how it was. It's not the Marva country, it's Maryland, Virginia, and Delaware. That's how it was in Greece. Greece is a region formed by, you have Athens, you have Sparta, Corinth, Thessaly, Thebes, all these city-states. They can form Greece, but it's not a country. So that's the first thing you wanna keep in mind. Now, as you can see here, this huge Persian Empire. We're going to use some historical thinking here. So if you notice here, here's what I'm just showing right there. That is called the Ionic Coast. And I mean, maps delimit the regions very precisely. There's a line. This is where it stops. This is where it starts. But that's not the case in the real world. So common sense will tell us that since this is the closest part of the Persian Empire to Greece, they would have some Greek influence, and that is right, because these were former colonies, or former states of Greece. And here you have famous cities like Troy, you have Halicarnassus, you have Ephesus, you have Pergamum, you have all these famous cities that were Greek cities once. And now they're under control of the Persian Empire, which is under the rule of King Darius I. So what's going on here is that now they're under control of the Persians, and like it happens most of the time whenever a very settled culture is conquered, well, it tends to be some disconcord around the people, and so the most common result is a revolt. So that's what happened in these regions. There was a revolt against the Persian Empire, and the Greek states here that I circled earlier, they supported that rebellion. But unfortunately, it was unsuccessful. It was put down by the Persians, and they remained subdued to the Persian Empire. But now the Persian king Darius was pretty pissed off to the Greek states for supporting this rebellion. So he decides he's going to take his revenge, and he's going to march on Greece. So what he does is he sails from these ports across the Aegean and disembarks right here at the plain of Marathon. And here's where we had one of the most important and famous battles in history, the Battle of Marathon, 490 BC. And I'm not going to go into detail. What you have to know is that the Greeks won that battle and sent their Persians back home. 10 years later, the successor of King Darius, Xerxes I, he retakes this mission that his antecessor began, and he decides to march on Greece once again. Now this time he does it by land. He crosses the Hellespont and tries to enter Greece from the north. Here, he tries to enter Greece from the north, and this is in the year 480 BC, and that is what the movie is set. So this is the background to the movie. This is how we get to what you see in the movie. So now let's get to it full time. So this is the very first scene that you see in the movie. It's a guy at the top of the mountain, and you see this skull.
Can I ask a question? I never saw this movie. Is it animated?
No, yeah, I mean, no, it's real.
There's real people.
Yeah, but one thing about the movie is that it's like 70-80% is computer generated.
Oh, because it looks like, it doesn't look like people to me.
Yeah.
Is that the way it looked in the movie?
That's not people.
No, this is the real movie.
Oh,
Have
okay.
you seen like Sin City or Spirit or any of, no? Oh, have you seen commercials for them? No? Okay.
Yeah, it's pretty much like it. It's the same director.
Okay.
But it is real people acting.
Oh, what?
So,
Oh,
They
okay.
like computer generated real stuff.
Okay. All
yeah,
right.
most of it is computer generated, but they're real actors. So here's the very first scene of the movie, and this one is actually right, and it depicts pretty well how Spartan childhood used to be. What you have to know is that Spartan society was a militaristic society. Everything was about war, everything. So it was also a very elitist society in which, I guess you could say, only the strongest were allowed in there. And therefore, the whole process began since childhood. So the second the child was born, he was put into a wine bath, sort of, and he had to pretty much survive in there. He had to make like his way out. If he didn't, he would drown. That meant he was not strong enough. If he survived, then he was taken here to the top Mount Taygetus. Mount Taygetus is the tallest mountain in southern Greece. And there he would be examined by this priest who would look for malformations or any imperfections that the kid could have. And if he looked strong, they would keep him and he would become Spartan eventually. If he had if there was something wrong with him, he would just be cruelly discarded. As you can see here, they would just toss him down the cliff. And these skulls are pretty much of dead children who were discarded. So it was pretty cruel, but this is how Spartan society was. And yes. And next, since this was a militaristic society, they really focused on Spartan training, which is very famous and today is even regarded, I think it's the second toughest training in history. I think it's just behind the British special forces today. And so it wasn't like today when you turn 18 and you go and enroll in the military. It was nothing like it, because being a Spartan soldier was the only profession in Sparta. So since you were a little kid, you were taken to it. From the moment you were born until you turned 7, you would be instructed in art, dance, history, all this fine arts, and then at the day you turned 7, they would come, take you from your mother, and throw you into the Spartan training, which is called the agoge. And the movie depicts it very well too. So as you can see, there's actually a screenshot from the movie. They literally just take you from your mother, and you start your training at age 7, and you don't graduate until 16. And down here I have some pictures of the stuff that they did. Now this was a very tough training. They would be, of course, it was all about fighting, physical fitness, of course, but it was also very dangerous. People died in this training because you didn't train with dummies or plastic weapons or fake ammunition. It was a real thing with real swords against real people. So that was a way for them to filter the strongest ones from the weakest ones. And if you weren't strong enough, you might make it through, or you might just even die. So it was pretty tough, but that's how they became the finest warriors of antiquity. And now here is the second part of the training, and this actually is in the movie too. And this is the first big mistake of the movie. This was the last part of the training. When the boy turned 16, he was just thrown out there in the wild in some random region, and he had to make his way back to Sparta. If he managed to do it, then he would have graduated and he would become a Spartan soldier. If he didn't, well, he would probably just die somewhere in the wild. So in the movie, they show Leonidas, when you see over there, the Spartan king, and that is also an error because the only one who was exempt of the regular training was the king's heir. You know, because since it was such a tough training, you cannot risk the heir of the king to die. Of course, he still got training, but it was special, something aside from the rest of everybody. And this is the movie they showed him like everybody else, which is a mistake. And here, what they don't show in the movie, and it's an error, is that the actual final test for any Spartan soldier was this. It was called the Krypteia, and it was the final phase. What you see here is the Helots. Helots were the Spartan slaves. That's pretty much the status they had. They were not citizens, they were just slaves who worked for Spartans. Sparta was the most slave-like society of all the Greeks. So the Krypteia consisted basically of being thrown in the wild, as you can see in the movie. But then the specific task that you had was to kill as many Helots as you could. And yeah, and they did this for two reasons. The first one was to train you in the art of stealth and cunning, and to get you used to actually killing people, because that's what you were going to do for the rest of your life. And if you were caught, then you would have a very severe punishment, not for trying to kill somebody else, but for being caught, because that's what they were trying to work on. And the second reason why they did this is because the Helot population was actually very large. So by having Spartan soldiers kill some of them, they use it as a population control measure, so they wouldn't get too numerous and revolt or something. So it served two purposes. Now after that, you see after that in the movie, Leonidas manages to get through the training. He becomes a Spartan warrior, and then suddenly they jump years ahead, and now he's a grown-ass king. And then what you see here is the Spartan women, and I think the movie depicts it very well, because Spartan women are really privileged. They're not anything like any other Greek women or any other in the world, basically, at that time. And the movie does a pretty good job of depicting everything that they did. And I actually put here 10 facts about Spartan women that I think it's worth mentioning, because it's very interesting how unique they were. So first of all, they were citizens of Sparta, which not all women enjoyed that right in the rest of the Greek states. So they were citizens, meaning that they had all the rights that men had, so they were equal amongst men. They also had political power, voice. They pretty much share the same rights that men did. The second one, they could dress daringly. The reason behind this is because if you remember, if you ever had an art history class, you remember that in Greece, they would very value the beauty of the human body. They really, really valued that. And Spartan women, even though they didn't fight, they didn't train as soldiers, they also trained their bodies. They were physically fit, and they would, and that's why they were allowed and even encouraged to dress daringly, to show that beautiful body that they had, because that was very, very praised by Greek society. Number 3, since they had to give up their sons at a young age, we already discussed that at the Agoge at the age 7, the boy would be taken from them, and they would actually never live with them again. After you were taken for training, you were never allowed to live with your parents again. So at 7, they had to let go of their children. Number 4 says the first ever female to win gold at the Olympics was Spartan, and this is pretty impressive for 2 reasons. First of all, because the Olympics, if they're a big thing now, they were even a bigger thing back then. And they were so important that their calendar was based on the Olympic Games. So every 4 years, every Olympic Games, where they were counted as we count years, basically. So the important thing is that only males were allowed, only Greek males were allowed to compete in this Olympic Games. But Spartan women were so fit and were so competitive in these disciplines that they made the exception to allow her to compete, and she actually beat the other men. So that is just a reflection of how different, how high they were regarded in Spartan society. Number 5 says they expected their sons to triumph or die on the battlefield. This is pretty rash, but it's true, because basically what they thought is that in the Spartan, the greatest honor you could ever have was to die on the battlefield. Actually, if you didn't die on the battlefield, you didn't get a grave. That was the only way you could be buried with honors, is if you died on the battlefield. So, of course, women wanted their kids to have that honor. So they would expect that from them. And there's actually a very famous quote that says, a Spartan woman is telling to her son before he leaves for the battle, she says, "Come back with your shield or on it," which means come victorious or come back dead. They would be knowing either victory or death. So that's how Spartan society was, and they were fine with it. Number 6 says Spartan women's greatest honor was to die during childbirth, and this is, just like men, their highest honor. It was the highest honor to die during childbirth because in a society like Spartan society, where males and the army is everything, well, they need pretty much, they need a lot of males and strong males to continue this tradition. So this was the greatest honor that a woman could have, to die during childbirth. 7 says they were in competition to bear the most sons. It goes back to the same thing. They needed to have not only a lot of sons, but also the strongest ones. I think any woman who gave birth to 10 or more sons, she was regarded, she was like promoted, she gained like a higher status in society when you reach 10 or more children. Number 8 says they had to make love in secret, and the reason behind this is, it's not that the Greeks rejected, Spartans rejected sex, because they actually encouraged it. The reason behind this is, it might sound strange to us, but it was their culture. The thinking behind this is that since they had to do that in secret, then that would limit them a whole lot. They would have to, not a whole room to move, not a whole lot to be able to do, so they would be limited. And they thought that this would actually increase the sexual desire in both the man and the female, and therefore they would make love with more passion and power and force, and then the offspring would be stronger. So that was how they thought it was. The more fiercely you do it, the stronger the offspring became. So that is why they had to make love in secret. Number 9 says they were major landowners, and self-explanatory just shows how powerful they were. They were allowed to accumulate wealth. Some of them even had more land and power than other men. And finally, this question says Spartan women caused the decline of Spartan society. And this was actually said, this was proposed by Aristotle 150 years later. And this is basically, he asked this question because since Sparta is a warrior society, that means the men are most of the time outside fighting. So it's the women who stay in Sparta and run the whole thing. So it got to, according to Aristotle, it got to a point where females have gained too much power, and they were running everything pretty much. And in a society that's male-dominated, and it should be male-dominated, and there you have women running the thing, then that's why he says it declines. So I think this is very interesting because this is not something that we can think of from women in this period. The next thing we see in the movie is the E-force and the oracle. If you remember, after this, the Persian messengers come to Leonidas carrying a message from King Xerxes. He throws him to a hole in the middle of like backyard, and that is pretty much a declaration of war to kill a messenger. So now they're at war with the Persian Empire. Leonidas knows this, and he has to prepare for battle. And that is why he consults the oracle, because it's a Spartan tradition to consult the oracle. No king ever went to war without consulting the oracle. This is the oracle of Delphi, which is the most famous one of all of them. And the E-force that you see here, they did exist, but they were not as they picked them in the movie. They were not old men, so these creepy men. They were not like that. And but they did have. They were pretty much law officials. There were 5 of them collected for 1 year, had to consult them for important issues like going to war. Down here you see the oracle from the movie, but it was a girl. All the oracles in history have always been women, but it was probably not as young as she looks in here. She was usually oracles were all considered very wise women who actually were in some kind of trance or psychological state, so they could deliver their prophecies and stuff. And so Leonidas goes to them, and they tell him the prophecy that the oracle gives is that Sparta and all of Greece will either fall or save itself at the price of a king's life. So it was pretty much, the message was pretty clear for Leonidas at that
Wait,
point.
can I have a question? So in the movie, they were these creepy old men,
Yeah.
but in reality, it was women.
No. The women were the oracles. The ephors, which were the law officers, they were just regular Spartans men.
But so in the movie, what was the difference between reality and the movie in this case?
Because in the movie, if you look here, I don't know if you can see them, but they're old and they're really creepy. They have
Those are the oracles in the movie.
No, the ones at the top of the ephors,
Okay.
the law officers. This is the oracle.
In the movie.
Yeah, these are screenshots of the movie.
Okay.
So the guys you see up there, they didn't look anything like they did exist, but they were not like, they were just regular
Okay.
men. You know?
And in reality, the oracles were women, but they might not look like that.
No, they usually were older women.
Kind of like the one in the Matrix that played the oracle.
Yeah,
I don't
that
know.
one. Yeah.
See, I never knew oracles were women. That's fascinating. What do you think?
Oh, I was just going to ask, you say when they're 7, they go on the battle and they have to do all that battle for the whatnot, and if they don't make it through, they die. How do they get the equals and stuff? If the kids like get thrown off the cliff and stuff?
How do you get to be an equal?
Yeah.
Well, pretty much is we're retired men because in Sparta, of course, you will reach an age where you're not fit for battle anymore. So now you go back to Sparta and start doing other duties, which are pretty much to serve in office. And this is how these were not, mature guys. They were old guys who had probably already retired from the military, and they had influence in the political life, and they were chosen. There were 5 ephors. They were elected every year, and you could not re-elect yourself. So they were pretty much retired.
But that's an interesting question. So, like, if you're supposed to sort of get out there and die, then these guys didn't succeed. They were like failures.
You're
right?
not supposed to die.
Okay.
I mean, you're supposed to be always victorious. It's just that if you die, that's the highest honor.
Right.
So
would they get a grade? Would you say if they don't die in battle?
Yeah, of course. Because you get your grade if you die in battle, but after you retire, that means you probably had a very successful career. You went to battle and you survived, and now you come back. So yeah, that's a good question. But yeah, they do. They are pretty much retired soldiers that run the office at this point. And now, you remember the movie? After that, Leonidas leaves the oracle, goes back to Sparta, and then prepares for the actual battle. And this is where we get to the army. Now, you might be asking yourself, why 300? Why only 300 soldiers? If Sparta had a pretty large army, 10,000 professional soldiers. It was the first professional army in history, actually. But why only 300? Because at this time of the year, there was, in Sparta, there was a religious festival going on. It was called the Carnival. It was a religious festival which, according to law, during that festival time, the army was not allowed to march to battle. So they had to always be in Sparta because that was the way the law dictated. So, and nobody in Sparta was above the law. We'll get to that at the end, actually. And so Leonidas was in a very tough position because he knew the Persians were already coming, but he was not allowed to use the army at all. So what he decides to do is he actually breaks Spartan law, and he takes these 300 finest men he can find, and these are basically his personal bodyguard. And he grabs his 300, and this is the guys that he takes to battle. He makes sure something important you must know is that all of these soldiers had to have born males already to carry on their name. So you couldn't go to battle without a male. So then again, you go back to the importance of women to give this to Spartan society. And so here's another era of the movie. I mean, the guys, they look great, but this is not how they went to battle, of course. The armor was crucial, especially because of the way they used to fight, which I'll get to that in a minute. So, I mean, going almost naked to battle was not how they did it. They did wear a red cloak. That is something that is right. Actually, this is how Spartan soldiers look. This is actually how they look. And I put the helmet up there because if you look back here, the only one wearing a helmet with feathers is right here. It's the king himself, Leonidas. And that is a mistake. Every single soldier had a helmet with the feathers on top of it. And so this is how they really looked. This on the left is a drawing according to written accounts, and this one on the right is actually original sculpture, which I'll talk about that one later. Yeah. And this word in the middle, hoplite, that's the category of these infantry soldiers. Just like today we have riflemen, snipers, that category. This was their category, hoplite, which they were basically infantry, the heavy infantry of any army. And as you see here on the left, they're wearing full armor. They have their protection for the shins. They have the breastplate. They have the helmet, and they have the shield. The shield is one of the most important parts of the panoply of a hoplite, because you'll get to that when I tell you how they fought. And here is another interesting thing. This is the shield from the actual movie, the one that they use. So if you look there, that triangle, if you ever want to know what that is the Greek letter lambda. Up there, the one on the right is the uppercase. This is the uppercase. This is the lowercase. So this is what it is. It's the lambda written on their shields, because the L is the first letter of the word Lacedaemonian, which is the region in which Sparta is located. So that is why they carry that letter on their shields. Now here's probably one of the biggest errors in the movie.
I noticed you had that letter.
Yeah,
Is that for your name?
Yeah, that's the same one. That's a different style. There were a lot of styles of Spartan shields, but the ones that were used most often are those ones, the ones with the lambda on them. And so here's one of the biggest mistakes in the movie. In the movie, most of the credit is given only to the Spartans. And I mean, for this particular battle, they did have most of the credit, but it was not all of them. It was not just the Spartans. Actually, there was a whole bunch of allies that they went to the battle. And here's a list of most of them. These ones are given by Herodotus, the Greek historian who wrote about this. So you have this huge list: Lacedaemonians, Helots, Mantineans, Tegeans, Arcadians, all of them. So it was Spartans plus all of these allies who went to the battle, and according to Herodotus and historians, they summed up approximately 7,000 soldiers. So it was not only 300 who went to the battle; it was around 7,000 Greeks who marched to this battle. There were 300 Spartans, but they also had other 6,000 allies. And here, that is another screenshot of the movie where the Spartans meet those are Thespians. Those are Thespians. There were 700 Thespians that went to the battle. And now on the other side, you have the Persian army. This is another screenshot of the movie when they're disembarking in the shores of Greece itself. And as you can see, this is their camp. It's a huge, huge camp. And what is important to note about this, also the numbers of the Persian army are always very difficult to be accurate with, because they are most of the time exaggerated. Because, for the simple reason that in pretty much every battle, they agreed to beat the Persians. And So when historians wrote about this, well, they tried to glorify Greece even more by saying that the Persians were millions and millions of them. So they always exaggerated the numbers. So it's pretty hard to come up with an accurate number. So these are the ones that have been used the most. Herodotus says there were 2,600,000 Persians. Frank Miller, which is the one who wrote the comic, says there were 1,106,000, and Ctesias, another Greek historian, it says that they were 800,000. So of course these numbers are huge by any means. They are, especially if you take into account the population, the overall population of the world at that time. I mean, 2.5 million soldiers. That's ridiculous. And so modern estimates by historians say that the most accurate number is around 250,000. So I mean, it's pretty hard to come up with a good number, but I think the most important thing to know about this is that no matter what the number was, it was the most massive army ever assembled at that time. So that's what they were facing. And finally we get to the battle in the movie, and it's called the Battle of Thermopylae. That is the actual name of the battle. And in the movie they never mention that name, they call it the Hot Gates. And as you can see here, in this picture, the movie took place pretty much next to a cliff. And that cliff is the that water is from the Mantinian Gulf, which for some reason at this particular area the water is very hot and it boils and all that. So that's why they call it the Hot Gates. But the actual real name of the movie, the battle is Thermopylae. It was the year 480 BC, like I mentioned, and
Which is where we get our word for warm, thermal.
Exactly.
Hot.
And this is actual footage from the movie. This is the formation that they use. I'll talk about that in a minute. This is from the comic book, the Frank Miller comic book, and that one is just an artistic representation. That is actually the closest one, because that's pretty much how it was, next to the cliff. And now here's another question that I would like you to think of: is why did they fight here? Out of all Greece, why did they fight? Why did they decide to fight in this corridor? Now, if you look here, we have Greece, and this is Sparta. Here is Athens. This is the Persian invasion came around here. They tried to enter Greece through the north until they got to this point. Now, here, Greece. What you have to know about Greece is that most of the mountains. There are just mountains everywhere. It's hilly terrain everywhere. So if you look at this, the goal of the Persians was to get to Athens and pretty much destroy it. So if you look, the only paths to Athens are you can go around here, which is pretty long, or you can go around here, which is the most direct way. And that is what the Persians did. And pretty much the United and their allies thought in advance of this, and so that is why they decided to stand right here at this very narrow corridor between the mountains and the Gulf. So, and this was a very, very, very good decision, because according to historians, to Herodotus, that pass was so narrow that only one chariot could fit through it. So it was very, very narrow, and such a small corridor could be very easily defended by Spartan soldiers, and most of all, the huge Persian numbers would count for nothing, because they cannot surround them, they cannot flank them. The only thing they can do is charge in front of the Spartans, and they would be at a disadvantage, because of course Spartans are 1,000 times better warriors than the Persians are. So this is why they chose this as the battle site for this invasion. And the reason why it was such a good decision is because of this. This is the formation that pretty much any Greek culture used to fight in. It's called the phalanx, and it evolved throughout the centuries. This is the earliest kind of phalanx. Then it evolved to the Thebans with the Epaminondas. Then Alexander the Great changed it again. So but this is the earliest one that was actually used by the Spartans. So basically a phalanx is, they lined up next to each other, they interlock shields, they lower their spears, and they pretty much give you this front of pikes. And the important thing, this is why I told you the shield was so important, because they're so close together that you actually don't use your shield to protect yourself. You protect the man to your left with your shield, and you are protected by the guy to your right. So they fight as a single impenetrable unit, and which is pretty much invulnerable from the front. I mean, the only weak parts of the phalanx is the sides and the back. And since this narrow corridor, as you can see, is all mountains, well, there's no way to go around them, so your only option is to charge head on, and that was pretty bad business for the Persians. So it was really, really a brilliant idea to defend this spot. And these are pictures of different kinds of phalanxes, the one from the movie right here at the bottom. And now that is the first day of fighting. If you remember the movie, they kill a lot of Persians, and then after that first encounter, King Xerxes comes to Leonidas and asks for an audience with him. That never happened. King Xerxes actually never left the camp. He wasn't even directing the battle. He would just give the order to attack, and his generals would actually take care of everything else. So this never happened. He never had an audience with Leonidas. But the important thing that I'm going to note here is that this guy looks nothing like the actual king looked like. You know, this guy is like 7 feet tall. He's completely bald. He's kind of dark skinned, and so this is not how he looked like. The actual king. Yeah, all that is jewelry and all that. That probably they did have, because you know Eastern cultures are very extravagant on that matter. But the actual king looked like this. This is a relief sculpture that we have. It's in Babylon today. So this is really how the king looked. He was much older than this. He had beard, and he was not this super strong guy, 7 feet tall. And there you see him holding his scepter, which is a sign of power and wisdom. And so that is really how he looked. And pretty much Persia today is Iran. Iran is what used to be Persian Empire, so, well, part of it. So I mean, just think of a person from Iran, and that's how he most likely looked. So, which is nothing like this. So that's another thing you can note. And then we get to this, the immortals, which are shown in the movie actually at the end of the first day of combat at night, after the audience, supposed audience between Leonidas and Xerxes. And these were real. The immortals were the finest elite fighting force of all of Asia. But of course they didn't look like this. They didn't wear masks. They didn't have this two swords like ninjas, and they didn't, you know, in the movie, one of their mask, his mask falls off, and he looks just like some creature, just like monsters. So of course they were not like that. They just made them scary in the movie. But the important thing to know is that the important thing about them is that they did exist, and they did go to this battle. They did fight against the Spartans. They were 10,000 men, and they were the elite of the Persian army. And this is really how they looked. This is also a relief sculpture that is in Babylon. And this is why they are elite soldiers, because if you see closer, they have a spear, a sword, and a bow and arrows. So, I mean, any soldier who can master all those three weapons is an elite soldier. So that's why the immortals were regarded as such fine soldiers. The thing with them is they were called immortals, not because they couldn't die, because they really did, and a lot of them died actually in the battle. They were called immortals because they were the force was huge. You know, elite forces usually were small. They were like 1,000 men. Alexander had 3,000 men at the most, but 10,000 elite soldiers is huge. So every time you killed a mortal, immediately he was replaced by somebody else. And you killed him, and he was replaced immediately, and they kept coming and coming, and there seemed to be no way to defeat them. Because they just kept coming and coming. So that's why they're called immortals, because there was no apparent way of defeating them. But it's not that they didn't die; it's just that they were very numerous, and it was just very hard to defeat them all. So this is really how they looked. 10,000 of those fought this battle, and they were the personal guard of the Persian king. They served them for 500 years. They served the Persian king. Now these creatures, I mean, I don't think I have to say a whole lot. You can just look at these things. Of course, they're not real. And here you have a rhino and elephants down there. They, of course, those were real animals, but they didn't use them in battle. Persians did use elephants, but they did it 2 centuries after this battle, not at this point. And pretty much, so all of these, of course, it's not true. None of these was used in the battle. The only animal that was taken to Greece were horses. 20% of the Persian army was made of cavalry. So that's the only animal they took. None of these was part of the battle. And here we come to almost to the final, to the end of the movie. Here you have a friend or ugly friend, Ephialtes. He looks like the hunchback of Notre Dame, but of course he was not like that. He did exist. He's a historical character, Ephialtes, and he's known to being a traitor. Because that's exactly what he did. He was a Spartan soldier who betrayed the Spartans into expecting a reward from the Persian king, which he didn't get, and eventually he was killed. He was killed by a headhunter, because of course the Greeks put a price to his head after the battle. And basically what he did was this. This is the map of the battle itself. This is the Persian camp, which I showed you earlier. This is the very narrow pass which Leonidas and the 300 and all the allies defended. And if you see here, the only apparent way to go is this, straight into them. And that's why they have been very successful through all of it. But there was actually a way around it, and it was called the Goat's Path, which is this you see here in this dot line. And it led back into the main road, straight behind the Spartan lines. The Persians didn't know this pass, but the Greeks did, because locals of this area used it very often when they raided the Phocians and other tribes that live around here. So Leonidas knew of this pass, and he actually sent 1,000 Phocians to defend the pass right here. So what Ephialtes did was he revealed this passage to the Persian king, to Xerxes, and he immediately dispatched the immortals to this passage. Of course, the Phocians that were defending this passage were not nearly as good as the Spartans were, so they were pretty much beaten very easily by the immortals. So they retreated back to the Spartan camp. They informed Leonidas that the passage has been discovered and that they're about to pretty much get killed. So at this point, it is a crucial turning point of the battle, because the only weakness that the Spartan position had has just been spotted, all because of this traitor Ephialtes. And so we get to the final stand of the Spartans in this battle. This is depicted pretty well, actually, in the movie. What you see here is, the army is retreating, but this is not the Spartan army. These are most of the allies that went to battle. And the movie has a great phrase that I think it really reflects what war meant to Spartans, because when the Phocians are sent back from are defeated at the pass, he comes back to Leonidas and he tells him that the Persians have found a way around the position, and he tells them that they have to leave because there's nothing in their left for them except surrender, retreating, surrendering, or death. And Leonidas tells him that for Spartans that's an easy choice, because Spartans never retreat and never surrender. So that is how warlike they were. They would die before, they didn't care to die as long as it was a battle. So this is a crucial point in the movie. He allows everybody else to leave, and except 700 Thespians that they just willingly decide to stay along with the Spartans. So we're looking at roughly 1,000 soldiers that stayed in there. The rest just went back to their homes. So of course, the next morning, the Spartans wake up and they're completely surrounded. And this is the final fighting scene in the movie. And there you see it here. They are completely surrounded. They are right there in the middle of that like turtle formation. And this is really how it was. Their position was surrounded. And in the movie, they are asked one last time to surrender. I couldn't find any accounts if this happened or not, but most likely it didn't. So basically they were just attacked by all sides, and all of these are archers, and that is probably the way they died, by arrows, because Persians did take praise on their archers, and there's even one phrase when they say that when they are threatening the Spartans, the Persian general says that their arrows will blot out the sun, and the Spartans say, that's fine, we will be fighting in the shade then. So this is the final stand. Right there you see Leonidas, the last one who stands up, and eventually he dies. All of them die. So this is the end of the battle. The Spartans and their allies lose. They all get killed, but however, they do inflict very, very heavy losses to the Persian army. It's around 20,000 losses, casualties for the Persian army, which is very demoralizing, taking into account that there were 300 of them and some allies scattered around the area. So it was a pretty hard blow for the Persians. They didn't stop the invasion, but Xerxes actually returned to Persia with his personal guard, the immortals. He just left another branch of the army in Greece. And this is why this battle is so important. Not because they won, because they didn't, but because they gained time. Because this battle lasted 3 days, and those 3 days were more than enough for the other city-states to start mustering their armies, which they did. And finally, we get to the very last scene of the movie. This is the Battle of Plataea, 479 BC. It's 1 year after the Battle of Thermopylae, and they just show you in the movie. They just show the initial charge, but they don't show who wins or anything. But I'm going to tell you anyways. It was after the Persian king retreated to Persia. The contingent that he left in Greece was confronted by a collision of Greek city-states and the whole Spartan army. But this time, the festival was over. The whole army could march to war now. So 10,000 Spartan soldiers, 30,000 Greek allies. They were still facing a huge army of around 90 to 100,000 Persians at the plains of Plataea. And I'm not going to go into the battle. All you have to know is that the Greeks won. And that was the final battle, land battle of this war. A few 2 or 3 years later, the Persian fleet was defeated at Salamis, and that was the final battle of the war. So this war was won actually by the Greeks, and it's a very important war because they pretty much saved Western civilization, I guess you could say, because had the Persians won, they would have taken Greece, and Greece was the mother of our culture, Western culture, so things would have probably been different. So right there at the bottom, you have another it's a painting of a battle, and you can see how they fought the phalanx. Here you can see them lined up with all their spears facing the enemy, and they can even get to hand-to-hand combat because of these spears. So it was a very, very effective way that they fought in. And so this is the end of the movie, and today this still exists. You can go visit it. It's in Greece, of course. That what you have to the right is a statue of King Leonidas. It's right there at the very same place where the battle took place. And this is a modern picture, a modern photograph of the site. The landscape has changed a little bit. As you can see, as I showed you earlier, the actual battlefield was next to a cliff. Here, that is gone because 2,000 years of erosion and the wind and all that has just changed the landscape. And this is a shot that I did from Google Earth. This is the ancient side, the actual side of the battlefield. Here it is. This is the main road, which leads straight into Athens. And this is what has changed over 2,000 years. 2.5 miles of land between the actual battle site and the Gulf. When 2,000 years ago, it was right next to it. So, I mean, you can still go visit this place. And the last thing that I want to show you is this. Simonides habitat. This is actually the real one. Here is the Simonides was a Greek poet who wrote an epitaph for the Spartans in this battle. Basically, it was directed to the Spartans only. And here, you see here at the top is the little mountain. This is at the top of the mountain where it is believed the last Spartan fell. And so this is what this monument was put. The stone that you see on top here is not the real one. This is a reconstruction that was made in the 1954, I think. But the site is the actual one. It is right there when it was 2,000 years ago when this was made. And the message is pretty, I like it a lot. I think it's a beautiful message that really shows the sacrifice that they did. And most of all, it invites us to remember them, because that was one of the things that Persians really emphasized on, that they were so pissed off at this that their goal was not to let the world know what happened. They were going to burn all parchments, kill every Greek historian, and punish them with death, mentioning the name of Leonidas or Sparta. So they pretty much wanted to erase them from history. So it is very important because now the message is very simple. And that is the Greek at the top, and here's the translation. It says, "Go tell the Spartans, stranger passing by, that here, obedient to their laws, we lie." So it's a pretty nice message. It basically says that any stranger, if you're going by and you see this, go back to Sparta and tell them that their laws, which are the laws of no retreat, no surrender, because of that, they're lying for Sparta and their country. So, as you can see, like I mentioned earlier, Spartan law was above anything else. Any man, any king, everybody. So that's why they regarded it so highly. And so that's it for the movie and my presentation. I hope you enjoyed it, and any questions. Any questions, suggestions?
I have a question about after the hunchback.
Yeah.
I thought that he used to be a Spartan soldier.
Yeah.
So like, what was wrong? He didn't really look like that though. Like, was he really?
Oh, in the movie? Yeah. Well, in the movie he's depicted as like I said, like a hunchback, but he wasn't like that at all. He was actually a Spartan soldier. He was part of the 300. He just was carried away, he thought that if he revealed his past to the Persian, he would be rewarded. But he couldn't do it because since when the Persians retreated, he had to flee for his life because the Greeks put a price to his head. So he had to flee, he didn't get the reward, and eventually he was killed by a headhunter. So he actually was a Spartan soldier. He was one of the 300. He's a traitor. That's what he was.
Did you find anything about him, about them using, how they use the phrase, "oh my God"? I heard they use his name as showing that as well. Like, "oh my, it's Brady." Is that true?
There is a phrase, there is a term that is related to his name, and it means being a traitor. I don't have it, but I read it once. I don't have it. But
yeah, that's how they would use. That would be a phrase.
Yeah, they do use his name to refer to anybody who's a traitor. But I don't have the exact word. Yeah, they do.
Even now.
Any other questions? Comments? Suggestions?
I thought that was really interesting. So how did you do it? How did you figure out how did you go about doing it?
Well,
Can you get the projector off? Can someone let me know how to do it? So we can hear you because it's all now exactly. Is there any way to do that? Does anybody know the system?
I just heard about it.
Oh, you did?
Yeah.
So how did you go about doing this?
Well, basically, some of the stuff I mean, my area of expertise is ancient history and most of all military history, so most of this I already knew it, but basically what I did was just look at the movie 2 or 3 times and just focus on the first. Well, some of those things are obvious, like those creatures. Of course, that's obvious, but other things are not so obvious. So basically, what I did was refer to the main sources that we have about this battle and this time, which is Herodotus of Halicarnassus, which is the Greek historian who wrote about this, and then also some.
And he wrote in what year?
He lived in. It was 380 BC. He lived roughly around.
Right. So he wrote
90 years. He wasn't around at the time of the battle, but he's the.
So he read a source that was 2,000 years old.
Yeah, we still have those accounts.
Good.
So,
Of course, they translated to English. They written in Greek.
yeah. So that was my main source, and I also consulted modern historians because, of course, Herodotus was after all a Greek, so he would, what I mentioned before, he would try to exaggerate some things like the numbers and glorify the Greeks, and that's something that modern historians really do. They just try to tell what is right, what is not right, what might be exaggerated, what might not be. So I also consulted British historians from the University of Oxford and the Royal Military Academy of Sandhurst that write about this topic, and they use their most modern research on the topic. So those were my sources to go about it. And also a documentary from the History Channel about the movie 300.
So you like military history. You love this stuff.
Yeah.
I think that would be really important to love this. Otherwise, it would be really hard to do this project if you didn't love it. Because you have all this detail, and it's like, if you didn't love this stuff, you couldn't do this, right?
This is my movie. I love this movie.
And I was watching you. You
Yes.
totally are into this.
I love this movie. I really thought it was for real. Because that's what I heard. Somebody told me it was based on a real story.
Which it is. But it's good to see that there's...
Yeah, which one's real and which one's not.
Right.
I was just going to say, I was surprised at how much actually was true to fact.
Yeah.
Because I expected it to be like way more off base.
No, it's just details. I mean, the story, you cannot change the story because otherwise it would just be completely made up. It's just little details that I wanted to focus on because, I mean, the story overall is the same, They get invaded, they go to battle, they win or lose. So you can't change that, but it's the detail that I wanted to focus on because those are the ones that are not as obvious, Those are the ones that when people go to the movies, they'll be like, they wouldn't look at them, they wouldn't notice them, and then they would go about just thinking that's the right stuff when it's really not. So that's why I wanted to focus on the stuff that's not so obvious, and also get some information like the Spartan women and all that.
Yeah.
Which it's not in the movie, but it's interesting to know.
Yeah. Is there anything that you couldn't find out, like you were interested in finding out whether it was true or false, but you couldn't find it out?
Not really. I mean, some things are unclear, like for example, the Persian army, their numbers. It's very unclear. I mean, every book I read, every site I went had a different number.
Yeah.
So it was just all over the place. I mean, I found a lot of stuff, but there was no clear thing that would lead me to think that that's the real and actual one. So it was very confusing. But I think that was the one that I struggled with.
And I think your conclusion of that was really good, which is, okay, we don't know the number, but we know it was the biggest army anybody ever.
Yeah, that's the important thing to know. It was the biggest, most massive army assembled to that day. Oh, and also the fleet. It was the biggest fleet assembled to that day.
So maybe you couldn't figure this out, but that's the question I had. Because you know how when they show the 300 marching, and you said they were naked, of course that looks good in the movies, and everybody wants to see that. But is that what people look like? I mean, those guys were massive.
Yeah.
I know this is a deceptive screen, it probably makes things
Yeah, actually,
but were guys that big?
I mean,
Yeah, Spartans were at least. There's a documentary from the History Channel that they actually compare warriors in history, and they say that they were comparing Spartans with who were they comparing them to? I think to a Green Beret.
Really?
Yeah, they were matching them together, running computer simulations to see who would win in a fight.
Oh, I remember
They were
that.
Who
they
would
were
win? Green Berets or Spartans?
I didn't see the end.
Yeah, and Spartans, I mean, there is a debate a lot of that because I mean, of course, we know a lot more today, you know, but I don't think. But these guys really dedicated their life to it. Their culture was war. So genetically, of course, we have evolved in 2,000 years. But I still think that these warriors were nothing like today, because no society today is like this. You know, war is like an important thing to the state. You know, and you don't want to neglect the military in your country. But this was everything there was to their country.
Yeah.
So Sparta equals war. That's how the way.
So what did they eat?
Well, Mediterranean diet was pretty much wine.
You don't get looking like that with wine.
Well, actually, they didn't feed them that much because they trained them to be able to survive out, because they were out most of the time, so they had to know how to survive with little food and all that. So they didn't feed them that much. Of course, these guys in the movie they were trained like this. I mean, they had special workouts and all that. But Spartans probably didn't look just like this guy, but they were pretty big. They were the finest warriors of the ancient world. So I mean, for their time, they had like no match. Yeah. And I would still think that they can easily compete with any warrior from the modern day, because their culture was just that. They dedicated their lives to it, which we don't do today.
I have a question.
We did our lives to video games, and we're really good at it.
I have a question. Did the Persians really consider Xerxes to be a god? I think that he couldn't.
Yeah, they did. The thing is, they did think he was a god, but at the same time, how can I say it? It was not his doing. It was a religious thing, but it was like heritage. Like, it was something implied culturally, you know, like he didn't have to like show power or do some miracles here and there he didn't have to prove anything. He was just like implied he was divine because he was king. Because he was king, and you know, in Eastern cultures, most of that is for divine. It's supposed to be divine ruling that gets you that position. And since the lineage of kings are direct descendants from each other, then they would keep the like divine status. So it was not. I don't really think they questioned it. It was just the way it was, and they just had to accept it.
And the important thing to remember is about what God is in Greek. You know, you got Zeus, and you got there's a whole pantheon. So and remember, some of them are part human and part divine. So that's normal to be a mixture of.
Well, this was the Persians, though.
Oh. See, I didn't watch this movie. That was the Persians. They had a different setup?
Yeah, I think it was two.
Well, they didn't have a single god, though.
It was King Xerxes that was attacking, and the
But
Spartans.
my point is that this was not a monotheistic culture.
Okay.
The idea that there's one god, and then, this is a panel, a multi-god.
Because I think theirs was when they captured people, they treated them right because they wanted them to be on their side. I think they had two types of God. I know once they started with a Z. I can't remember the name of it. But there were two types, because theirs was different than the Greeks. I can't remember the name of the two, because one was bad, one was I can't remember the name of it.
Okay, I've heard that.
But yeah, I mean, you could say he was considered a god king. He considered himself a god king.
So what eventually led to like the Spartans just not existing? I mean, obviously, 2,000 years, but like.
Well, after this was in 480 BC. By the end of that century, they got into a war with Athens. It's called the Peloponnesian War.
Mm-hmm.
And they got into a war with Athens. They did win the war, but it was very, let's say, it was devastating for both. So after that, they couldn't recover because 40 years later, no, it was 50 years later, after the Peloponnesian Wars, Philip II came. Philip II was the father of Alexander the Great, and he reformed the military, and he professionalized the Macedonian army. He was from Macedonia. So he professionalized the army, he made it the finest war machine of the time, and he set out in a conquest of Greece. He subdued Thebes, Athens, Sparta. Thebes, he actually destroyed it, and Athens and Sparta just surrendered. So now all of Greece was under Macedonian control. In 356 and 338 BC, he died. No, 336 BC, he died. Alexander took his place, and since this was a new king, and he was only 20 years old when he became king, all these Greek city-states saw a chance to get their independence back. So they revolted, but I mean, Alexander the Great was probably the greatest general in history, so he just put down the rebellions. They still were under Macedonian control, and Alexander set out to his campaign in Persia and India. So right now they still exist, but they are like protectorates of Macedonia. You still have Sparta and all Athens and Corinth and all these city-states, but now they're under Macedonian control. And then when Alexander dies and his empire divides, that's when you have Pyrrhus of Epirus, and he pretty much conquers everything back. Then you have the Romans. So pretty much after this, the territory changed hands every certain number of years. So they didn't have the chance to come back to their former glory. So I would say the turning point, it was the Peloponnesian Wars, which devastated both. They didn't have the power to face the invasion of Philip, and they just became protectorates and subdued them.
Oh, perfect. Okay, so I'm still going to ask you about the question I asked you before, but I'll ask you another time about why was this an interesting thing to do for this course. But thank you, that's it, right? Mm-hmm. Thank you very much, that was excellent. Thank you all for choosing to be here. That was